Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to acknowledge before we start that we're gathering today on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people and welcome you to today's agenda. I'd like to acknowledge alternate Director Manhas with us today. Thank you. And hopefully Director Marsh and Director Smith will be feeling better shortly. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item of business is approval of the agenda.
Approval of the agenda, so moved. Seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Next, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item M1 is approval of the Corporate Services Committee minutes of October 9th, 2019.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. If you'll just bear with me, I'm dealing with some new glasses and everything's moving. My parents used to call them bifocals, but we as baby boomers had to have a new name, so we call them progressive. So please, if I miss you, it's not me ignoring you, it's my glasses. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item M2 is the minutes of the Special Corporate Services Committee meeting of November 21st, 2019 for adoption.
And again, Director Stone, Director Sebring seconds. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you very much. Any business arising, Ms. Legault? Now we go to the public input period. The policy is on the board. No input today? No, you're just going like that? Nah. Just here to watch. Well, you will be entertained, ma'am. Next, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegations D1, Peter Weber, Transportation Planner with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure regarding the South Vancouver Island Multimodal Transportation Plan. Update and next steps for information.
Excellent. So you have 10 minutes, but I'm quite sure that if needed, we would be happy to give you some more if you should need it.
Right. We'll try to respect your time, but appreciate that if we do end up going over. Over to you, Mike.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Pearson. I'm the District Manager of Transportation for Vancouver Island District with Highways. And today Peter and I are here to provide you with an update on the Southern Vancouver Island Multimodal Transportation Plan. Long title, but thank you for having us. Really, we haven't met with you guys since June of last year, and so we wanted to give you an update today about what we've been up to and where we're going with this plan. And talk about a little bit about next steps. As I just said, sort of the purpose of today is really to provide you an update. We've been working on this for the last 8 or 10 months, and this has involved a lot of meetings with our technical advisory group, our TAG group as we call it. That involves representatives from, you know what, I'm jumping ahead. I'm just going to skip this one. Go right to here. It involves a lot of consultation in the last 8 months. We've been working on collecting all the existing planning studies, including our own, the planning studies from the regional districts, the CRD and CVRD, as well as BC Ferries and BC Transit, working with First Nations across the region, and as also our technical advisory group. Which we've met twice now. There's representatives from all communities in the South Island, as well as BC Ferries, BC Transit, Department of National Defence, and of course the CVRD and North Cowichan. So we've met twice, and through those groups, we've received input and feedback on sort of a lot of the historical ideas that we've studied before from the ministry side of things, and as well as talk about some new ideas. And really the purpose of all the information we've gathered so far was to produce the Transportation Snapshot. The Transportation Snapshot is a document that we delivered back in the fall. That was shared with the TAG group, which again has representatives from everyone. So hopefully you've had a chance to see that. If not, hopefully soon. That is still a working document. So as we continue to receive feedback and information from our TAG group, we are continuing to make tweaks and updates to that Transportation Snapshot. But the purpose of that Transportation Snapshot was really to identify where are we going with South Island. So where are we at right now? What is everyone's hopes and aspirations? And how do all these documents that are out there align? Are we going in the same direction? And are we identifying the same transportation barriers to interregional travel? And really that has been the focus of this plan, is interregional travel. That is that. So that, as I said, was delivered this fall, and that is helping to inform the plan. So now that we have that snapshot available, the plan will now be developed using those barriers that we've identified, as well as looking at those historical plans, to develop the South Island plan, and looking at the short and medium term investment going forward. With that brief introduction, I'll pass it to Peter, who has been sort of our lead on working with Urban Systems, our consultant on this project, in the development of the snapshot and the plan.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, everybody. Thanks again for having us. So as Mike was saying, this snapshot serves as kind of an input for where we're going to be going with this plan. As Mike also said, we based this on a lot of the information that already existed. We looked at things like OCPs, the CVRD's regional collaboration framework, the Parks and Trails network, looked at the transit future plans for the CVRD, as well as obviously all the work that was done in the CRD. And then we used the information that we got from our TAG group meetings, what we heard from you last time we were here in June, what we've heard from the CRD, as well as kind of our one-on-one work that we've had at the staff level with the various agencies. What we were looking for, as Mike said, was to try to understand what are those core transportation barriers that are causing some of the issues, and where are those kind of gaps in the networks that we need to focus on, and where we can enhance the local, regional, and provincial aspirations and priorities that are in the region. And really what we've seen when we've developed this snapshot is that the aspirations that you have here regionally, what municipalities have for their aspirations and priorities, as well as what the provincial government has, are really in alignment. So, for instance, for the CVRD, sustainability, livability, reliance, relationships, those are kind of the key tenets. We're seeing that from other municipalities and the other regional districts, and it also is in line with the work that the provincial government is doing. So, for instance, our Clean BC program, the recent active transportation guidelines that just came out, and a lot of the other work that we're doing. So when you see that list of kind of what we heard, this taking action on climate change, connecting communities, better integration, reducing auto dependence, promoting more sustainable choices, active transportation, growing economy. This is pretty broad across everybody that we've talked to. So really this this snapshot, the biggest thing I think it highlights is, while there are fairly similar kind of core transportation barriers, what we're all trying to achieve is in line with one another. As we mentioned, we've talked with several First Nations. We've reached out to all the First Nations in the study region, First Nations and treaty groups in the area. We've talked to several. So obviously in the CVRD, we've worked at the staff level with Cowichan tribes. We've talked to the Malahat First Nations, as well as Tsuut Nation in the South Island, and what we've heard from them, probably shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Obviously, walking and cycling and the connections between those is a big I would say issue, but it's a big priority for them. Safety, of course. When we're saying lack of travel options as a barrier, is it transit? Is it other modes of transportation? And the connections between them. Obviously, Cowichan commuter, which is right here in your area. A lot of that was the level of service and the connections to those service. And then, of course, the economic development, climate change is just kind of an overall priority for the First Nations. So in terms of what we've heard, as Mike was mentioning, the plan was to consider all the options. And that includes the historical options, where most of that work has already been either done by ourselves or other agencies in the region. So Highway 1 transit priorities, obviously commuter rail, that's the ENN, up to Duncan, but also the commuter portion in the South Island, Victoria to Langford, regional LRT, even the West Shore Ferry. We've looked at the expanded service on Mill Bay. All of these ideas that were kind of already out there, we've kind of refreshed, we've brought up to date, and are considering them from kind of this multimodal kind of perspective, and what it would mean for the interregional networks. It's not to say that these options at this point, because we're still at the very preliminary stage, they're in, they're out. Some of these options might not be part of this particular plan in that short to medium term, but are they part of a longer term plan? Is there some, phased approaches to these plans that could be included in the South Island plan? Those are the kind of things that we're looking at in terms of those historic ideas. In terms of new ideas that we've heard, some of these are building off existing ideas that are either the ministry is already supporting, so bus lanes and transit priorities that we're already working on, and then from what we've heard from our technical advisory group, and even from the CVRD and the CRD meetings, what's really come to the top of the pile, and of course there's so many different applications across the different corridors, but bus, transit, ideas and priorities seen as obviously.
Just going to interrupt you for just a second. You're down to 10 seconds, so I'm just going to look for an extension. All good,
sure.
carry on.
Good to go? All right, I'll try to speed it up, sorry. It's a lot in this plan, so it's hard to, it's hard to compress. Anyways, so you can see what some of the ideas that we've heard are in line with with those priorities that that we've been hearing as well. So active transportation connections, those intermodal connections between different modes, transit, supporting planning around other kind of regional serving travel where we can leverage priorities from different agencies. And then some of the newer things that we're looking at, such as transportation demand management, energy efficient vehicles, in line with Clean BC. So it's important to understand that not all of these ideas that are being considered are just strictly infrastructure. We're also looking at those policy-driven kind of strategies that we can look at. And of course, you can see this is just a truncated list. There's a lot for us to still consider, and we are still at the preliminary stages. Sure. So based on the information that we've received, that snapshot that we've done, and some of the things that are emerging in terms of the ideas that we've heard to follow up with and consider, we've started to draft what some of the kind of overarching goals for the plan could be. And again, it's those goals that are based on what the aspirations and the priorities are, not just provincially, but for all the other agencies and the public in general. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, so just to finish Peter's thought there, so we've drafted these 4 goals, and they are still draft goals. At this point, we feel that we've developed these based on all the input and information we've looked at so far. So those goals being ensuring sustainable multimodal travel options, strengthen intermodal connections, improve safety and reliability, and support and encourage active transportation. And the point of these goals is really to make sure when we're looking at where we're going with investments, that these align with the priorities and the aspirations, not only of our own plans, but of the South Island. So These are, as I say, still draft, so they are subject to further input and refining, but they're a starting point for us. So in terms of next steps, we delivered the transportation snapshot in October of last year. As I say, that has been shared with our tag group, so we are still tweaking it as we receive more feedback and information. We are right now looking at completing the analysis and review of the historical inter-regional transportation ideas, those old ones, and looking at some of those new ones that Peter was talking about. And then also looking at priority medium-term strategies and actions. So that is looking at what is the next investment, where this is going. And then ultimately delivering the plan in the spring of this year. And that is our presentation.
Great. I have a speakers list, so if you're open to questions, we'll afford them the opportunity. Director Sebring first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, gentlemen. The last time you were here, I asked some questions about Island Corridor Foundation, and I see that rail is only mentioned in your PowerPoint tangentially as part of the historical reality. I also see that the Island Corridor Foundation was not part of the TAG group and not identified as a group that was actively consulted in the way that other groups were that you name in here. Frankly, that concerns me. We said, at least I said, and I think this board sort of communicated it last time you were here in June, that was an important piece for us here in the Cowichan Valley, and I don't see it reflected anywhere. Can you reflect on that?
Sure, we could probably answer that in two. There's in addition to the South Island Transportation Plan that's going on right now, we're also working on condition assessment. And in that, we've been working extremely closely with the ICF, developing that study and updating the costs to restore the rail service. So through that conversation, they've also been involved in the South Island multimodal plan in terms of consultation.
But they're not mentioned anywhere here, and that's what I'm saying. That's what concerned me.
Right, and I guess yeah, and I take your point there. You know, we have been working with other stakeholders, so say the ICF and you know, some of the other like C-SPAN and a few other groups that are outside of the technical advisory group. The Island Corridor Foundation, because we have that other assignment that's going on, which is being used as an input for, you know, the snapshot. We have been working with them directly as their own stakeholder, but I can, like, we just had a meeting with Larry and Andrea and Al, was it a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? So we have been keeping them up to date. So I appreciate that, yes, it wasn't, you know, reflected in this because we were just showing what's in the tag, but they have been a stakeholder, obviously as part of the condition assessment, but also for the South Island plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Director Acton next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure you'll be able to answer this fully, but I think, you know, when we start asking the community what they would like to see, you set some expectations. So I'm curious if in electoral areas, there's some expectation now, and then if there will be some kind of funding like towards some of the new ideas that you listed, I think are really interesting, and a lot of our communities would be interested in having those amenities as well, but can we foresee the funding that comes along with it? And
Yeah, it is a little too soon to be able to speak to funding at this point, where we need to complete the technical work first before we can get to what funding looks like.
Yeah, follow up?
so I guess, can you give us a little bit of maybe data of how much electoral areas were involved, considered in this, and how it would affect an electoral area versus some of the other areas?
I guess to answer that, we've relied heavily on the work that has been done by the regional district in terms of your own planning work to inform our work. So we haven't got to down to the level of it in specific electoral districts or areas, but we've looked at those studies that you guys have yourselves.
Okay, Director Wilson next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that, Mike, Pete. That's good stuff. Mayor Sebring has already covered some of the stuff on the ICF, and that's something that I'd love to see started up again, but I'm not too optimistic on that. With the Mill Bay Ferry improvements that you mentioned, do you have any idea as to what that might entail?
Yeah, so it was just looking at, I guess, kind of from two points. Is one is, you know, an enhanced level of service. So whether that's just an increase in actual, you know, actual service levels, or is that, you know, an enhanced fleet, like a larger vehicles. Of course, we also have to consider, you know, what a footprint would be like for, you know, a new ferry terminal, you know, all of those sorts of things. Again, this is still very high level. So what we're trying to do with a lot of the ideas that are coming out of the South Island, especially some of those bigger ones, and not to say that, you know, Mill Bay is a huge idea, but it's to really look at what a particular level of service, so an enhanced level of service, or, you know, maybe a different level of service, like pedestrian versus, you know, vehicles, what that would look like for ridership, forecasting, and what that would actually mean for kind of the network that they serve. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at right now. But essentially we're exploring, you know, a few kind of options that, you know, have been talked about before, right? An enhanced service at Mill Bay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good, because given the choice between, if I'm going to the airport, for instance, it doesn't save me any money or time if to either go round or to go across on the ferry. So my preference is to go across on the ferry if it's available. Now the other thing is that you talked about a bridge across the Saanich Inlet, and this is nothing new by any means, but if my understanding is correct, the depth profile across any point of that Saanich Inlet would make it practically impossible. So any other form of bridge is just going to stop any form of marine traffic through there as well. So is it really a viable option?
We looked at that initially in 2007 with the Malahat report, so that is a good reference in terms of all the challenges associated with the bridges. We've looked at it again to say, well, let's not throw it out immediately. It does have a lot of challenges, like the depth, like navigable waters, even the terrain getting down there. So is it a viable option? I mean, we're looking at this holistically to say, like as Peter mentioned, if there was a bridge there, forgetting the challenges associated with it for a minute, what would that really do in terms of diversion of traffic onto a bridge? What does it actually serve? So take away the challenges for a second, and how beneficial would a bridge be?
Director Salmon, you're next.
So thanks for the presentation. And multimodal, I actually brought a prop today. For my I even have the bicycle. But so for cycling, commuter cycling in particular, are you getting much feedback on that, and any kind of interest as far as improved roadside paths? I know one of the big issues on the highway is the shoulder. Even though it's available, it doesn't feel safe. So particularly between Duncan and Victoria.
Sure. Go ahead. All right. Yeah, I mean, I can give you just kind of a, you know, generally. So, you know, we've been hearing from, you know, obviously, you know, municipalities. We've talked to the Greater Victoria Cycling Coalition, and we are looking at, you know, those kind of improvements where we can on the existing networks and the existing corridors that we have. Obviously, you know, the biggest ones are the Galloping Goose, the Lochside Trail, the you know, those rail trails that, you know, we own and are operated by the CVRD. A lot of the other things that we are looking at is those intermodal connections of how we can get folks either from their cars to their bikes or from their bikes to transit. Those are, you know, and whether those are at, you know, some of the kind of the hubs that already exist, or is that, you know, maybe looking at the possibility of creating, you know, new kind of park and ride type facilities. In terms of the, you know, the actual road network, you know, as it exists right now, that's kind of the operational piece that we're also looking at in terms of, you know, safety and reliability for kind of all users of the road.
Yeah, I think Peter's kind of covered it there. We've heard a lot of, as Peter mentioned, sort of that interconnect between services. So, you know, if you're taking transit and how you're getting to transit, sort of that, the ability to switch between modes. So that's a lot of the feedback we've heard so far. Of course, there's always the operational ones of shoulder widths and that kind of stuff, but.
Follow-up?
Quick follow-up. So yeah, they're just between, you know, South Cowichan and Victoria's, we've got the great trail, but it's, you know, even with the electric bike that I have that are coming on, it's still not there, so some kind of roadside path consideration. I talked with your colleague Don last week about the one we're planning in Shawnigan Mill Bay Road, so that's a start, but if there's just focus on that for future, would be great.
And that's certainly something we've been working with you guys actually on very recently, in addition to other regional districts, with our memorandum of understanding in terms of active transportation, in terms of how we can permit those within highway right-of-ways. And right now I'll make a plug for the active transportation grant, the new Bike BC, which is open, taking applications until February 20th.
Good plug.
Good to know.
Had to do it.
Excellent. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and maybe a little different tack, but you just actually mentioned part of draft goal number 3, the improved safety and reliability, and that's sort of the direction that I wanted to go in. There's been tens of millions of dollars spent on upgrades and safety upgrades and the likes on the Malahat number 1 highway, and accidents still happen, and there's you know, there's issues around not only just the safety for the traveling public, but the economic interruption and the likes that go with that. So I'm just curious, are you able to comment on some of the perspectives and considerations that are going into this work around that particular issue? Because obviously it's a big concern when it happens, and apparently people don't like taking the circle route to get home at night if they can help it. So any thoughts?
Do I speak to the detour? Sure. So we're doing a lot of planning at the same time. We recently completed the Malahat Emergency Detour study as well, which kind of looked at that. And so that report was released late last year. And it suggested that we can continue to work with the existing corridor. So yes, we are looking at it in terms of when we do major upgrade safety projects, like our most recent one where we upgraded 5 kilometers there. We are considering, you know, working with emergency services on when it's closed, how do we manage that? How do we deal with that? So having openings in the median for emergency services to be able to get around, or detour traffic and that kind of thing. So it's certainly something we're looking at in terms of our goal of highway operations and safety improvements.
Thank you. Director Stone, you're next.
I'm not going to go too deep into detail, but I just think there's a prevailing concern when we talk about transportation, especially on the South Island, around just a consistent feeling that our policy and our decisions are made in a framework that is very much should be in the rearview mirror. So I really hope that whatever recommendations come out of this are more forward-looking to you know, road design that doesn't accommodate cyclists, that feels in a safe and efficient manner, is not designing for, you know, this century of transportation. So it would be a real opportunity missed if we continue to sort of be car-centric in our focus when we're trying to actually get cars off the road. And then that speaks to the rail issue. I remember being in a meeting at the beginning of this government with the Minister of Transportation and the Premier, many staff members, and it was almost a universal theme with the mayors and representatives there, including all the mayors in this room and other representatives, that there was a strong push for an honest 21st century look at rail. And meanwhile, you know, we continue to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in improving, you know, many may say, you know, very difficult road networks, and the improvements in practice don't seem to be offering the benefits that they were promised to make in terms of actually removing the congestion and improving people's commutes and such. So I'll just keep it general, but I'm very concerned about the lack of what seems to be good faith investment in rail as an alternative, and that modern transportation, especially on the spine of Vancouver Island, should include rail. But meanwhile, if we add up all the amount of money that we're having discussions with Nanaimo and Victoria about bus services, it's not a bridge too far to use a transportation pun, to equate those dollars spent with something that would be long-term, should be more invested in. It's just, I feel like I'm in crazy town when it comes to transportation policy in this province. Even in a much considered regressive worldwide transportation system like the United States, or even in the Lower Mainland, there's significant investment put into more forward-looking ideas, and I really, really hope that the ministry actually starts to look 30, 50 years ahead and plan for those transportation options rather than investing in old road networks that we shouldn't be investing in. We should be removing cars and freight if we can from those roads and look for something that's a little bit more effective. So just my comment and my feelings on it.
And I don't think that warrants a reply. Thank you. No, you did not. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our delegates today, thank you so much. That was a good update. I just have, and I'm very happy to see that we're moving into active transportation, which is not just about cars. We did have, my first question is the TAG group. Who from CVRD sits on that?
Jim Wakeham and actually
Rochelle? Oh, okay, great.
Is who? Yeah. So Rochelle attended the first meeting, and then Jim was at the last meeting, and we give our updates to both staff members in terms of the snapshot and everything. Actually, I just had emails with Rochelle this morning about that. So.
That's great. Thank you so much. The other question is, a couple of years back, we had an applicant come forward that we're talking to the Ministry of Transportation about an electric ferry for passengers from Cowichan Bay to Saanich, and had done a lot of work. Were you ever presented with that, or has that ever come up in any of your active transportation, or was it even feasible? I just wondered where that went.
We were aware of that. It was a private venture. In terms of looking at electrified fleets, that's something BC Ferries is looking at, and would be something that could be considered kind of for all the fleets. That particular ferry, the Cow Bay to the peninsula, wasn't included in this particular project because there wasn't a lot to go on. The stuff that we were looking at, so even like the West Shore ferry, right, there's a full report on that. The Mill Bay ferry, there's work that's already been done, so we built off that. And just because that particular one, there wasn't much to go on other than an idea, it was not considered in scope for this particular project.
Okay, thank you.
Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Is the alternate emergency route issue between CRD and CVRD part of this project?
No, no, it's not, only because we did that in the different study. We did that through the Malahat Emergency Detour route study.
Can you speak to that and where we're at with it?
Sure, yeah, that was completed late last year, December of last year, and so we've released that study. And that, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no, where, I've been looking for it, I can't find it.
Oh.
Yeah, I will make sure you get a link. It's on our website. It was published, I believe, December 19th or somewhere in that neck of the woods.
Okay.
And I guess just to follow up, so as part of the historical ideas that we're looking at, we did refresh the work that was done in 2007, which had alternate alignments as well, and we are, refreshing those to see if they, still make sense, maybe as a longer term plan or as part of something else. So other alignments of the Malahat is something that we're looking at, but that Malahat detour, because it was specific to just an emergency detour, it was a standalone piece of work.
Can I just, I'm just curious, did you actually consider, or would you consider that route that comes down the Cook's Island into Shawnigan? Was that part of the forest roads that come down through there?
From Shawnigan to... To Souk or?
I'm not sure where it ends out, but it's maybe Port Renfrew.
We can certainly, we can maybe talk about that
Like
later.
there was a big issue with community being concerned that the Mosaic was realigning at some of its forest roads so
yes.
that there would be a great route.
Yeah, I heard rumors about that. There's some work going on up there, but it has nothing to do with anything we've been doing. But there was, we looked at 7 different route options. And so I'm not sure if it's specifically the one you're speaking to, but maybe we could share the report with you and talk about that.
And Director Staples is the last one I have on my speakers list.
Thank you. I just want to, I guess, just follow up a bit more with the rail conversation, and I have a question. So you said that you're doing a report separate with Island Corridor Foundation. Will the results of that report then be fed in? Because I realize we're only at the second sort of stage in your stage process here. Will those be fed into this at some point before we receive a final draft? Is that part of the intention?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So the point of that study is to inform in terms of the costs and the level of service that you'd get for that cost. And that will be used in development of options.
So that will start to show up further
Correct.
on down this process?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any further questions? Or well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. Appreciate that. Ms. Legault, any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Information items? So moving to reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R1 is a report from the Finance Division on the approval of short-term borrowing for 2020. There are 6 recommendations in this report to authorize short-term borrowing to be paid back over 5 years as per the liabilities under agreement, Section 175 of the Community Charter. The first item is $760,000 under Function 232 for land acquisition.
Did you wish to do these one at a time?
I'll move all of them.
Well, let's move as they've been read. So we'll move the first one. It's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that one? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Next.
Short-term borrowing of up to $413,483 for parking lot upgrades under Function 411 Kerry Park Recreation, to be paid back over 5 years under the liabilities under agreement to the Community Charter.
Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Stone. Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Number 3.
It's short-term borrowing of up to $415,000 for the chiller replacement under Function 423 to be repaid back over 5 years under the liabilities under agreement, Section 175 of the Community Charter.
Moved by Director Sebring, seconded by Director Staples. Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. Next.
Short-term borrowing of up to $85,000 be approved for guardrail replacement at Bings Creek under Function 520 to be paid back over 5 years under Section 175 of the Community Charter.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Morrison. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. That carries.
Short-term borrowing of up to $100,000 for the purchase of a skid steer under Function 520 to be paid back over 5 years under the liabilities under agreement.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Toporowski. Want to get you in the minutes. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you.
And 6 is short-term borrowing of up to $13,000 for the well rehabilitation under Function 613 to be paid back over 5 years under Section 175.
Director Acton moves, seconded by Director Nicholson. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries as well. Thank you. Next, R2. I'm sorry, Director Salmon.
Sorry, I should have asked this on number 1, but just a question for staff. that short-term borrowing, that's just for Area B taxpayers? Is that right?
Community park.
Community parks?
Yes?
That item was in the approved budget under function 232, so
Yes.
it will only go through that budget function.
Clarified? Excellent, thank you. Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R2 is a report from the Finance Division on the timing of grant payments. And the recommendation for consideration is that it be recommended to the board that organizations receiving annual grant funding from the CVRD be advised that where possible, payments will be altered to coincide with the receipt of tax revenue from the province.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Stone. Discussion, Director Nicholson?
I'd just like to say I appreciate that staff phased this in.
You agree? Any further discussion? Point well taken. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. Next, Ms. Legault?
Thank you. Item R3 is a report from the Finance Division on the credit card policy, and the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that the credit card policy be approved.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion? Director Nicholson, did you have?
So I'm wondering, like, I get that it costs us money, but I'm wondering what kind of, if this is making, if this is being less service oriented. Do we have a lot of people that usually use the credit card to pay for things that they won't be able to now? Recognizing that we hardly ever have checks anymore in our
Yes, Finance.
Yes, we do have quite a few people that are using it for paying their bills. So it was just that some of the departments were noticing such an increase in the charge to their budgets. So yeah, we do have quite a few. We do recommend people to use online banking, and we do put that on our statements for the UB stuff. So.
Okay with that, or do you have a follow-up, or?
Well, I'm just a little bit nervous about, just putting up one more difficult to deal with the CVRD thing.
Okay, thank you. Director Stone?
Yeah, now, at first I read this and was like, well, if maximum limit of 1,000 or 5,000 was fine, but then saying that folks can't use credit cards to pay for curbside recycling, garbage, utility bills. I understand the thrust behind it, and $85,000 in credit card fees is quite a savings if that was able to be realized, or at least a large portion of it. But yeah, it's just difficult because I think that we had an issue municipally where developers were paying big permit fees with cards to collect points, right? So it wasn't a cash flow issue, and those kinds of things I could support saying no. It's cash or check, check generally, or money transfer. But when somebody comes and pays their utility bill with a credit card, I'm probably thinking that that's not necessarily to collect points. It may be a financial need at a specific time. I just have difficulty with that because sometimes people are at a stressful time. I know myself, after Christmas, the credit card actually gets used more than during Christmas, in that maybe month or two following. I'm just, I get it around some of the bigger ticket stuff because it shouldn't be, but it gets me on the little stuff where people might be needing to use it out of financial need.
Okay, I think we have Finance with some input.
Through the chair to Director Stone, we find that most of the utility bills that are paid via credit card are for large, like stratas, et cetera, versus the smaller one. The smaller ones tend to come in through online banking and those ways. So I understand and appreciate your concern, but we've actually had one today for points, actually, and they were quite willing to go and send in and do payments otherwise.
So follow up, Director
Thank
Stone.
you. I don't want to deal with the exceptions, more of the rules, so I'm happy with that explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the actual policy and report, and I see that there's two exemptions. One is prior approval from the corporate financial officer or alternate for unique circumstances. Fair enough. The other one that seems to be always exempt is the Cowichan Valley Capitals Hockey Club. Can somebody explain to me why that is?
Who's got this one?
Why are they special?
We love hockey.
I'm hoping to go to the game tonight. I love it too, but
Well, we're going to keep you longer than that. Yes, please.
So I did discuss with the Cowichan Community Center concerning the Capitals. They are situated outside of Canada, so they pay from outside of Canada. The ownership is outside of Canada. That is the reason for the exemption for them, is he's not local.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any further questions? Director Staples.
I just have a quick follow-up to Director Stone's question. I guess it would go through to staff. That those exceptions, if there was an exceptional situation, then the exceptions that you've listed could I guess, exit out of the policy for extenuating circumstances?
Through the chair to Director Staples, yes, that's why they have the ability for unique situations that the CFO or the or alternate is able to waive them.
Okay. Any further? We'll call the question on the credit card policy. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry, I just have a hard time sometimes when I think about this. So this is the hockey one really kind of does something to me morally. So it's owned outside of the country, and now our taxpayers have to pay a percentage of what they use on their credit card, but we're not willing to do it for our own taxpayers. Something's just not right to me on that point.
Thank you for your concerns. Okay, moving on. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. R4 is a report from the Finance Division on a revised operating reserve fund policy, and the recommendation for consideration is that it be recommended to the board that the revised operating reserve fund policy be approved.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Staples. Discussion on this one? Call the question. All in favor? Okay. I seen the hand come up a little early. I thought, opposed, if any. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R5 is a report from the Information Technology Division regarding a budget amendment approval for Function 100, and the recommendation for consideration is that it be recommended to the board that the 2020 budget for Function 100 General Government be amended to 1. Increase transfer from operating reserve by $32,000, and 2. Increase IT infrastructure by $32,000.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by alternate Director Manhouse. Discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item UB1 is a verbal report from Director Stone regarding the Finance and Audit Select Committee for discussion and direction.
Would you care to take the podium,
Just
Director
put your
Stone?
hands down. I haven't asked for volunteers yet. So as you may be aware, as part of a discussion on staff remuneration compensation policy, it was decided that it would be forwarded through to committee for consideration. There may be other items I think we've talked about loosely over the months of other items that may be assigned to that committee. So what we've proposed is to put the committee together today, ask for volunteers to form that committee. The terms of reference, we would ask staff to bring a draft to that first committee meeting, much like we did with Director Services. The committee volunteers would then help give input to that terms of reference, would come back to this committee for approval, and then the committee would go to work and deliver those recommendations back to the board. At this time, the only thing we've got firmly on that agenda is the staff compensation policies. But again, as we go through the discussion around the terms of reference, the committee members may suggest other items that we could add, and those will be brought back to this committee for approval, and then we would go to work. So it's two pieces. The committee is struck So at this time, I'd like to see how many volunteers there are. But keeping in mind that if everybody wants to be on it, there's no point in forming a committee. We would just do that work as part of corporate services. But if there's a subsection of the board and committee, I would say likely, 5 to 9 people would be manageable. I would defer to staff if that's too unruly. If we get beyond that, that we would take those
Unruly?
volunteers at this time. Unruly, well, I know you're going to be there, Al, so the conversations will definitely be.
So your intent is to gauge
Ask for
interest?
volunteers. See if there's hands to volunteer.
Do we have hands?
Yep.
Are you writing them down? Because I'm not.
I think our corporate officer is writing
Okay,
them
keep
down.
your hands up,
Sorry, I should.
and
put my
then
hand up.
we'll get into discussion on that if you
And
wish.
my understanding is Director Smith was interested as well, so I would speak for her. She could always withdraw if that wasn't the case. Well, that's why. So, through to Ms. Legault, then how many people was that?
So I've counted 8, and just to make sure that I didn't miss anyone, I had Director Morrison, Sebring, Salmon, Wilson, Stone, Nicholson, and Smith. Oh, so 7.
Staples
Staples.
and Smith.
Smith, I said.
Okay.
And Director Nicholson, you had a question or a comment on this, please?
So is the intent, what is actually the intent of it? Is it going to cover off reviews, that kind of thing as well?
So it was the staff compensation policy. When that was brought to the board couldn't work through that at the time, and the decision at that time was to assign it to a committee that was assigned that task specifically. However, there was some conversations from different members that there may be other items related to financial discussions and policies for the board may want to consider. Much like was done with Director Services, the terms of reference would go to that first committee meeting to be worked on. Once those parameters were set and agreed to by the committee, that recommendation would come back to the board as per most task force or committee formation policy.
Follow up?
So I don't necessarily need to be on the committee per se, but I am really very interested in continuing to push this idea that we do regular third-party reviews of our business, and that there be a plan around that so that we can continuously improve as an organization. And quite often in an organization you would have a like an internal audit type of a committee that would.
That sounds like
So I'm
a
just
great suggestion for the terms of reference for that committee, if you would want to come forward.
I'll come forward to the terms of reference
And
forming.
to be fair, if the committee didn't decide that as being workable, or staff advised that there's a different avenue, it doesn't mean that somebody can't withdraw from the committee. I think that's a workable number. I'm kind of looking to staff based on, previous discussions. So I believe that's within the chair's prerogative to just form the committee, or do we need a vote?
That was going to be my question, whether you were going to bring it forward under your report as a chair, or?
Well, that's why I'm asking through to staff.
I believe a select committee is up to you to appoint.
But I'm not, but the weird thing is we're at Corporate Services Committee, so the chair can do that, but does it have to be done at a board meeting? Okay.
Okay, I have Director Kuhn. Microphone.
I presume, as it is with other committees, if a board member wants to attend that committee meeting, there's a possibility to attend that and also to vote on it.
Sorry, I'm not quite clear. So you mean not be a member of the committee but show up and vote as if you were? No. You can be there, but if you're a committee member, if you're not on the
You can still vote.
As far as I know, a board member can vote, no matter what committee it is. If a member wants to attend a committee meeting, he can do that, he or she can do that and vote. I just want to make that clear.
So if that's the intent of members of the board, then I don't see any point in forming a committee if you're just going to kind of jump in to vote without being there to do the work of the committee.
No, I thought the purpose of the committee is to keep it smaller.
Yeah.
And you'll have it smaller. It's just now and then, maybe a board member is interested in one particular session, why not?
Well, I think we're able to attend any committee meetings that we wish.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Seems to defeat the purpose of a committee, but good to know.
Director Sebring.
It's a process question, and we ran into this municipally where we are, and that was exactly what we had. Any council member could show up for a committee. If they weren't on the committee, their presence wouldn't count for quorum, but they could vote. And we got some advice from our staff about 3 or 4 years ago and said, stop that, because now you're de facto, you can be council or the board because you've got a full quorum. And I know it's a little bit different here, but we might want to have a look at our procedure bylaw and iron some of that out, because procedurally it can run you into some difficulties. I have a question too, Mr. Chair, not to beg the question, but how does the chair get appointed to this committee, assuming we go ahead with it? Is that up to you as well, or is that at the will of the committee, or what's the process?
I'd have to put that through to staff for clarity.
Because
Clearly, I don't know my governance as well as I thought I did.
Because to be clear, I'd be very interested in chairing this. I'm just putting that out there.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a list of names for...
Again, municipally, I've always appointed chairs to committees that I've struck through the powers of the mayor, but this is a different act, so if it's elected by the committee, then we would do that at the first committee meeting as well.
Okay. Clarification?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just looking at the Local Government Act right now, and a board may appoint a select committee to consider or inquire into any matter and report its finding or opinion to the board. The chair normally establishes standing committees. I would think that we could do some work on the terms of reference, and there could be some discussion at that time what the will of the committee was in terms of election of a chair of that committee.
Exactly the opposite of that, yeah. Sorry, because municipally, the mayor has the power to form a select committee, not a standing committee, but a select committee without any council vote, and to appoint the chair. So, but in this case, you're saying it's exactly the opposite of that. Okay, good to know.
Okay. Crazy rules?
Well, that's the Local Government
That's
Act
the
versus
rules.
the Community Charter, so.
That's
All
the
right,
rules.
so then you need a resolution from the board or a recommendation to the board from this committee that those members be appointed to a select committee, Finance and Audit Committee. And I guess that's all the resolution needs for now, and then at the first meeting, we'll take it from there.
Okay, if
So
you're
I would
moving that.
I would move that.
Director Morrison is seconding that. Any further discussion on this? Okay, we'll move that forward. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That'll move over to the board, I believe. Thank you. Oh, no, you did great. Any new business, Ms. Legault? No new business. Question period. Cliff, anything today? Come on. At least I can see you with the new glasses, yeah. That's the year. That's the year. No closed session, Ms. Legault? Excellent. Looking for number 13, moved by Director Morrison of adjournment, and Director Kuhn seconds. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, staff.